Okay. Okay, and I think we have Toni Solo with us, do we?
Yeah, hi Don, how you doing? Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine. 4x4. Good morning, how you doing?
I'm okay, I'm delighted that I finally got this machine working right. Because we used to do our conversations on another machine that was a bit more complicated to work out.
Sounds great.
This one's much, yeah. So how's everything up there?
It's nice. We've had beautiful weather the last few days. We're supposed to have beautiful weather today also. And, things are going as well as they can under the current political, economic, and social and cultural conditions of planet Earth.
Okay, Don.
Aside from everything, in other words, things
right,
are fine.
Okay.
So we got a lot to talk about. Where do you want to start?
Well, I'm here in Nicaragua. We're all very sad because an army helicopter on a routine mission involving coordination of emergency responses to possible earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and so forth, which have been in the news over the last 12 months here in Nicaragua, because there's been a lot of seismic activity here over the last 12 months.
Really?
One of the army helicopters crashed under completely inexplicable circumstances. And the whole crew of 10 and the 2 pilots were all the passengers, 10 passengers and 2 pilots were killed. And that included all the senior officers of Nicaragua's very modest force, which is a terrible blow.
Oh my God!
So yeah, and it's in a small country like Nicaragua, an incident like that is really felt a lot. So people are feeling they're feeling very, very hurt at the moment because of that.
Suspicious too.
Well, and it is suspicious because the helicopters that they use are very reliable Russian-made helicopters with a very, very good safety track record. And what seems to have happened is that there was some kind of mechanical failure followed by an explosion, which was really, really strange. So that's saying, that there'll be an army commission. Right. And a government commission set up to investigate what happened, but people were really, really hit hard by that, because there's a very close relationship between the population here and the army,
right.
Which is it's probably unique in the world, because the army here is very, very much identified with ordinary people. I know all the senior officers are ordinary people who they're very much in touch with the needs of the population, and the army here is dedicated in great measure to civil defense activities,
right.
Which in a country like Nicaragua are extremely important, and for that reason the army is extremely valued by the local population.
Right. Yeah, that's terrible.
So, yeah.
I'm sorry about that. Condolences to the people of Nicaragua for that. And
yeah.
Watchful eye to see what the next move is, if that was some sort of dirty trick.
Yeah, who knows? It's impossible to tell until there's some kind of formal investigation, and here formal investigations actually do tell the truth. So yeah, and apart from that dreadful event, the events in Brazil are obviously at the forefront of the news this week, and it's a very confusing phenomenon for a lot of people, very unexpected. And with no really quite very large mobilizations, even in a country with Brazil's population. Brazil's population is 205 million. It's not as big as the United States, but it's by no means, it's a comparably sized country,
Right. Same scale. Yep.
So, and if you get whatever the number was, 80,000 people on the streets of Rio or Sao Paulo or any of the other big cities in Brazil, then that's very significant.
Right. Telesur is reporting that yesterday across Brazil there were perhaps 1 million people in the protests, which, it's a lot, but I remember having protests like that against the war in Iraq in the United States, for example, and, and yet the war happened anyway and continued for years and years.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I know all these figures. It's interesting how all these figures become a kind of another arena of conflict between the different ideologies, isn't it? Because the right wing and the in the North America and in Europe will try and maximize the numbers. So, for example, you get The Guardian talking about 2 million people on the streets in Brazil.
Right.
And then you'll get people defending the progressive government in Brazil, saying, oh, well, there aren't that many in relation to the total population. And so it goes, So, nobody can deny that these are very, very big demonstrations, and they've had a very real effect. And it seems to me that I don't know a great deal about Brazil. I know other people know a lot more about Brazilian society than me, but I'm just looking at it from the outside. It looks as though it's a kind of a situation in which grassroots resentment about their conditions of life, which initially were set off, of course, by their demands that bus fare increases in public transport not be rescinded. But it includes a lot more, because they're now talking about some improvements in public services and health and education services, and they contrast that with the spending on some big football tournament. I think it's called the Confederation Cup or something.
Right,
I'm not a soccer fan, so I don't even know I don't even know what level that is. I should imagine it's some big international event, some big regional soccer event.
Yeah, well, they're also folding the expenditure for the Olympics in 2 years or whatever.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so
right.
it's it's maybe not the Olympics, but something on that order in any event. That's and there are arguments on all sides of that, but there's a context too. You said something very important, first of all, when you referred to the government of Brazil, the progressive government of Brazil. That's part of the context for this. In addition to that, there are the changes that have occurred in Brazil as a consequence of that government for working people in particular and the poor, and also the larger context. This is the B brick in the brick. That's the part of the wall of the global south that's rising against the imperial structure. And removing Brazil from the BRIC countries would be a major coup for the United States in many ways.
Yeah, and it's hard to know to what extent who knows, there may be a very important level of right-wing manipulation of these events, but at the moment that's by no means obvious, is it? And it's interesting that Dilma Rousseff, the Brazilian Prime Minister, has actually welcomed the demonstrations as a sign of the good health of Brazil's democracy. And one has to remember that it's the local government authorities in Rio and in Sao Paulo and the other cities that where the bus fares were supposed to be increased, that were responsible for trying to impose that measure and initially refusing to even consider negotiating around that.
Right.
And for the great majority of impoverished people in a country like Brazil, or Nicaragua, bus fares here in Nicaragua are a very big deal in the capital, Managua, and I should imagine it's very, very similar to the situation in the big metropolises of Brazil. For example, here the bus fares are held at something like 10 cents of US dollar.
Right.
And even, and most people will, take an ordinary family, and I think that's the case in Brazil as well. I think they're down around that level. And the bus fare increase was going to be of that order of about 10 cents US dollar in both cases there in Brazil. And if you look at that, you and your colleagues and friends in New York will know this very well, because it's a global phenomenon. And any increase in the cost of public transport implies a major increase in the costs for an ordinary household.
Of course.
Yeah, so and it's obvious that even what in U.S. terms would be an extremely moderate price increase, 10 cents dollar, in a place like Brazil, where people have much lower levels of income, that is a really big deal, because an ordinary family, say you have a family of 2 adults and 2 children, and say that in a country like Nicaragua or Brazil, both those adults will be doing something to generate income for the household,
right,
and the 2 kids will be going to school.
Right.
So what you have there is at least 8 fares a day.
Right. 80 cents if it's 10 cents or whatever, which is, that
And
can be substantial.
and often, if people have to go a long way, it'll be, they'll have to do
2 fares.
One person will have
right.
to pay 4 fares in a day.
That's right. Well, compare that with New York, for example, where it's $2.50 for the single fare.
Right.
And that's 10 times what it was 30 years ago, when
Right.
they were changing tokens because they went from 25 cents to 30 or whatever it was. I remember it.
Right. So I'm here in Nicaragua, for example, one of the main reasons that people in Managua are very supportive of the central government is because central government has taken the decision and has done for something like 5 or 6 years now, to subsidize public transport and keep the fare fixed at 10 cents dollar. So, and that's been really important for people, because it means that they know that the central government is actually well aware of their economic problems, and although in the macroeconomic context the government can't magically increase salaries, they can at least protect people's living standards by keeping the price of public transport fixed at a reasonable level. So that's a very big deal, and it explains why those bus fare increases were a trigger for what seemed to have been very spontaneous demonstrations in Brazil.
You also have to consider bringing class into the equation. The class character of the government in Nicaragua, rests on a stronger leg among the working class and poor people than the Brazilian government does. The contradictions in Brazil are quite different. The bourgeoisie there is much more powerful.
Relatively much bigger.
Yep, and so consequently, there's, in terms of setting policy at the national level, to go to a 10-cent fare, or the equivalent of a 10-cent fare in Brazil, you would actually have to roll back substantially the cost of transportation, and the economic wherewithal is not in the control of the state there yet, and so you have this kind of contradiction at the center of these kinds of political and social responses, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the central point to make, isn't it? Because I think an article by the Brazilian writer Emir Sader, and he made what is essentially the same point that you just made, that what seems to be going on in Brazil is a contest between just public demands for an equitable distribution of state resources and private sector attempts to hijack public resources for activities that will make them a lot of money.
Right.
There were kind of grumblings in the United Kingdom back when before the Olympics in London last year, because people there, kind of in a typically British way, were resentful about the use of public resources for these Olympic mega projects.
Right.
But in a very British way, they didn't turn out in their hundreds of thousands on the streets to protest, you know.
Right.
So and that says to you, I think that says a lot about the state of democracy in Western Europe, for example.
Oh, for sure.
And in contrast with the readiness of ordinary people, the great majority of ordinary impoverished people, to insist on their rights.
You know, and you have, again, that same contradiction here. First of all, just as an aside, here in New York, when they had the Olympics up at Lake Champlain or Lake George, or wherever the hell it was, Lake Champlain, I think, a few years back, you had the same, certainly the same opposition being expressed, but the scale of it, the way the media treated it, the whole bit was as if it went to sleep. The contradiction that carries again here is that because the government doesn't have the resources to do this as a public project, and so to reap public benefits, they're required by the existing conditions there and the existing class relations to do it as a quote-unquote public-private partnership, which brings discontent among people who would like to see a public enterprise or nothing, and also among those who are on the right who see any convergent work between the state and the and private capital as being unfair to small capital.
Right.
So you have.
So I think I agree with that, and I suppose it's impossible, and I don't think it's realistic at all to try and kind of characterize the political makeup or the political significance, the immediate short-term political significance of these massive demonstrations in Brazil. And I think we just have to wait and see how things pan out, because they don't seem to be identified with any clear political movement. It seems to be a spontaneous mass protest by the most impoverished sectors of Brazil's urban centers.
I think the key is going to be when people start raising demands outside of single issues where they go. If they call for the state to nationalize the economy, for example, that has one character. If they call for the state to dissolve, that has another character. If they call for the state to withdraw from BRICS and that kind of arrangement, that has yet another character. Yeah,
and a lot depends, a great deal depends on the way the different levels of authority react, because I don't know the political makeup of the local authority in Rio or in Sao Paulo, but I suspect that either one or both of them are probably in hands of the centre-right opposition to President Rousseff's government.
Right.
And their reactions are likely to have as much influence on events as the reactions of the central government. And so far, the central government is not denouncing the demonstrations as irresponsible and misguided and stuff like that. They're actually saying, well, look, this is really important and we've got to listen to what people are saying.
Yep. Yeah, quite different from Erdogan, for example.
Right.
Telesur reports that Brazilian media were saying that there's been infiltration of the groups by organized right-wing groups in some of the street protests, that are looking to incite conflict with the police. Then they could criminalize the left parties and destabilize the government all at once. That's one of the things that's being floated in Brazil, apparently.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. And it's impossible to imagine major public events like this not subject to attempts by the right wing and the usual suspects. North American and European elites will use all the mechanisms at their disposal to try and weaken the position of Dilma Rousseff's government,
Right.
So, yeah, and another, perhaps, I don't know if we've got time, but it might be worthwhile trying to make the link between what's happening in Brazil and something that we haven't talked about that has been relevant over the last month or so, has been the new communications law in Ecuador. Ecuador passed a law regulating the public news media.
Really?
And that, I wouldn't be at all surprised that if you hadn't heard about
I
that,
haven't.
because it's something that is absolute anathema to right-wing media corporations.
Right.
Because what the new law does in Ecuador is that it sets very clear parameters, limits, if you like, to the what is regarded as acceptable conduct by national and local media, and it also makes statutory provision to guarantee resources for community media.
Right. That's the most offensive part to private media, of course, carving out
Right.
some part of the commons for the people.
Yeah, and I again, as in Brazil, I'm not especially well informed about the nitty-gritty of the detail of the law, but it does make provision, for example, in what in America talk about administrative law, so that they'll have, which it would be distinct from civil, strictly civil proceedings or strictly criminal proceedings,
Right.
or strictly constitutional legal proceedings, and so most of this law, communications law, is within the ambit of Ecuador's administrative legal system.
That's how it is in the United States, by the way. The Federal Communications Commission is a creature of the Telecom Act in the early 30s and revised several times, including in 96. And it's an administrative process that you go through, and it's administered that way across the board.
Right. Well, that's very interesting, and because and perhaps at some point in the future we can look forward to communications law reigning in Fox News and CNN and the like.
Yeah,
but
no kidding. Good luck.
Let's not hold our breath.
Yeah.
But the law in Ecuador essentially means that, and it came about largely as a result of the government getting absolutely fed up with right-wing press attacks on its integrity and actually spreading downright lies about what the government was trying to do with its program.
You mean they have to tell the truth? My goodness. Right.
Well, yeah, and the law, and not in as direct and ingenuous or simple a way, actually does say that reporting has to be within the limits of what can reasonably be regarded as the truth.
You can't help us. We got to stop there.
Yeah, you got to stop there. Can't have that. People telling the truth. Whatever next.
And all right, and that's the end of our program, folks. Tony, thank you very much for joining us, and maybe we can explore this in some depth next week, unless something else pops up in the interim.
Yeah, let's see what we can do.
You got it. Okay, Toni Solo, thank you very much. Peace out.
Take care, Tom.
Take care. Okay, and we're getting close to the end of the program, as the theme music under my voice indicates. This is CPRmetro.org, Community Progressive Radio for the Metropolitan New York area and the world, from the Metropolitan New York area to the world and beyond, wherever you may be. You've been inside the CPR Morning Show with Don DeBar. I am, have been, and ever shall be, for better or worse, Don DeBar, and I will, no doubt, be Don DeBar again on Monday when we come back with another edition of the CPR Morning Show. Bernard White is up next with Emanations, followed by this week's edition of Building Bridges with Ken Nash and Mimi Rosenberg, your Community and Labor Report. So keep it right here. And we have a lot of really cool stuff going on over the weekend for you, so check back frequently and tell your friends.
Whether they're black, brown, red, yellow, or white, this nation is about rich people, privileged people, powerful people,